Alright, so this is going to be my last solo one until the one I do on Saturday. And also, this is going to be kind of off the cuff, so hopefully, it'll keep me from rambling too long and kind of make this a very concise understanding of the nature of deconstruction and how it applies to a particular thought experiment I'm going to pose. Now, the first thing I'm going to pose is the concept of how we understand reality and how we acquire knowledge. Now, we acquire knowledge as a product of mind. That is to say, we develop our own sense of knowledge through experience and through the critical understanding of what others and what the world feeds to us. So, that being said, what happens if we devoid the individual of experience? I'm going to bring up, well, I'm going to paraphrase a particularly famous thought experiment where an individual is left isolated in a chamber for, let's say, 18 years of their life. From their conception to their birth to the target age, this individual has no social interaction, has no means of stimuli, has no sensory input or output for the next 18 years of their life. And I know this is you know, at first you're probably recoiling at the thought of an individual being completely devoid of experience for like almost a good quarter of their life. But as I said before, this is a thought experiment, and we're doing this for the purpose of exploring the concept of how we acquire knowledge and how we know what we know. Now, in this experiment, the individual is in an isolated area. They have no sensory input, like I said before, and this individual has no means of entertaining themselves. There is food that is provided, the bare minimum needed in order to sustain oneself throughout the duration of this experiment, and water, all the basic elements of life, um, but nothing too remarkable about them. They don't have unique taste, they don't have unique textures. Let's just assume they're being fed some kind of, you know, vitamin essential vitamin like mineral supplement thing that will keep them sustained throughout the course of this experiment. There's no unique taste about it. Um, that being said, at the end of 18 years, what will the individual walk away with? And it's kind of intuitive to believe that there is going to be no sense of operant conditioning that's going to be created. The individual will have no basis on which to know anything. They won't have any critical thinking skills developed. They won't have any intrinsic knowledge sets that they'll be taken away from it. Um, but a lot of philosophers argue that there is a sense of self, a sense of intrapersonal knowledge that is developed as a result. And I wanted to kind of address that um, as a kind of statement that I believe the contrary, that the individual is very much a product of their environment and a product of others perceiving them. Without that sense of perception of self, there is no knowledge of self aside from that perhaps the self exists. Um, and that's another interesting point that I can kind of delve into right now is how do we define the self? What is the self? And how do we go about determining what aspects are of the self and are of not the self? Um, and in this particular experiment, I believe that the individual will only come away with the fact that they know that they observe. Um, and they observe very little because, like I said before, no sensory input or output. And there may even be a incomplete, if not non-existent, understanding of the self, and thereby raises the question of if the self is unable to perceive the self as independent of their environment, is there actually a self? And that's the main issue that I wanted to talk about today. It was just something I was musing on for the past couple of days. Um, so, like I said before, as my first axiom, I believe that the self is the product of the mind. Um, that the self is the product of the mind means that the mind is contingent on its ability to function. And in order for the mind to function, we have to have some kind of input that is being given to the mind. Now, what happens to the mind when the mind is devoid of input? Um, if the mind can't actually process anything that's being given to it, aside from a very, very small um, but unavoidable set of criterion, then what does the mind take away? Well, in this experiment, the mind is only able to perceive the very small enclosure that is devoid of any sensory input, and as a result, learns very little from its environment. Um, it may develop conclusions based on its surroundings, which we are all want to do. It may come to the conclusion that the room is the only place that exists in this universe, that the only aspect of the universe that is important or is even existent in the user's mind is the room, and what it's able to take away from the room. Building upon that, since the mind is very, very good in building upon information that it's given and developing multiple conclusions based on what it's been given, the mind might actually further conclude that the individual in the room may be the only person that actually exists in this universe. The unseen hand that feeds it the food and water may actually just be an additional aspect of the room. Um, as we kind of develop that concept further, then there is the concept of presence of mind that I want to talk about a little bit, where deconstruction relies heavily upon. Now, presence of mind means that the way we understand and the way we know and the way we develop our culture is based off previous statements that have been proven true, that have been contributing to this constant state of motion that we call the present. Now, as the individual perceives the present, it is building upon previous information. Now, in this experiment, there is no um, divergent information that will be allowed, or to the best of human ability in this particular thought experiment. So, as a result, the question arises: if there is nothing to build upon, as in the information is constant and the same, then is there a past? And furthermore, if there is no real difference between the past and the present, is there even the concept of past and present in the person's mind? Now, one can argue outside of it that there's an objective present and past that has been occurring outside of the person's awareness, and that's where we kind of go on to one of our three basic axioms that I was talking about in previous podcasts, where there is a world outside of the world of the mind, an objective reality in which we all share it, but we come up with different conclusions based on the information that is given to us. So in that user's mind, there actually may not be a concept of past and present. There is just a concept of sameness. But as we talk about the user mind is the only mind that it can perceive. So as a result, the concept of time may not actually even be developed. And the individual may not notice the passing and the aging of their own body. As a result, that is just a concept of sameness. And that is the one independent factor that we can take away from this experiment, is the concept of the independent body being developed over time, because everything's subject to aging, so we agree on. And as a result, the only thing that the person can perceive is their own physical being. But that would be in a very limited sense because of the fact that we are completely devoiding them of sensory information, so they may not even notice that. Um, and the one other question I wanted to add is if the user is unable to see, unable to perceive their own being, unable to perceive a sense of past and present as a result because those concepts are never fully formed, then does the user perceive themselves as real? And if the user doesn't perceive themselves as real, then is there anything in this particular mindset that is real? And as a result, that would be kind of a contrast to deconstruction, the concept of deconstruction, which would suggest that we, all have a presence of mind innate within our character. Anyways, that's just a thought I wanted to pose um, first and foremost as we kind of delve into our topics later on this week. I just wanted to kind of pose those, and perhaps I will give my answer later on. But if you are listening, this is an opportunity for you to answer the questions that I posed. Hopefully, it would be an intellectually satisfying endeavor, and perhaps this can be another avenue of the podcast where I ask these questions and you provide answers, and then we can um, in later episodes touch upon the answers that you've given me and kind of explore them. All right, this is Zoob signing off, telling you to think for yourself once more.